All right. Good morning, everybody. Good morning. So, last week was a slow news week, but Saturday, Valentine's Day, little Marco went to Munich and spoke to the Munich Security Council, and he gave an absolute barn burner of a fantastic speech. And I'm not talking about his oratory skills, which were not extraordinary, but they were on point. We certainly have better speakers. He gave a very competent speech, but the content of the speech was excellent. Okay, we have very pro America, very uh, focused, good content in this speech. And so I've got my five key talking points, that my kind of takeaways. Western civilization is a thing, he said, and it's worth defending. So he frames the U.S.-European alliance as civilizational and not transactional, which is solid. Talks about the shared history of philosophy, law, moral order, not just NATO spreadsheets, and talks about heritage, civilization, and what it is that we're defending. Now, where this really matters is part of that conversation was, hey, we're partners in things, okay? Right? NATO guys, right? We're supposed to be partners here. Not just all you saggy little bitches hiding under our coat, our skirts, and hoping that mommy will come out and swing the rolling pin at the bad bullies. It is beyond time that the other member nations in NATO and the rest of the Western civilized world began acting like adults. America has, frankly, we've lost our patience with subsidizing your psychopathy, your socialism, your weakness. Okay? Canada is weak. Great Britain is weak. Germany is weak. All of Europe, they're essentially parasites riding on our sofas. Mario likes to talk about Israel, and I don't disagree on many of the points that he makes about Israel getting way too much money from the U.S. And not being a valuable partner. Now, in defense of Mario's criticisms of Israel in this context, I will say that Israel does appear to have a more substantially outsized say in American foreign policy than do the European Union and just Europe and Canada, broadly speaking. But they all have much more voice through various mechanisms of patronage and lobbying committees, and yes, through directly funding Democrat political campaigns, quite to the contrary of the law, of what the law allows. But to the Israel point, one of Mario's biggest criticisms, and okay, so real quick, it's okay to criticize Israel, okay? That doesn't make a person anti-Semitic. I won't even go so far as to say that being anti-Semitic is necessarily bad in and of itself. Where I have a problem with the Israel first, just the Jews are behind everything, Israel's behind everything, kind of crazy conspiracy nuts. They're not wrong that Israel has an outsized effect on America and gets a huge amount of our money without being a valuable investment, without offering us any ROI. What I want people to pay closer attention to, or at least to pay equal attention to, is all of Europe is the same. Okay? The best thing you can say for any for any of our European allies, any of our European partners in any of these contexts, is that they are as expensive or similarly expensive to Israel, right? They return nothing of value for our investment in them, for our subsidizing their free health care and open borders and just the intentional sacrifice of white Western European culture to the ravening hordes of illegal invaders. The most positive thing you can say about Europe is they have somewhat less influence on American foreign policy than Israel. But understand, the Europeans, especially in the context of membership in UN and NATO, they are living entirely off of American largesse. We are funding their defense. We are subsidizing their health care. We are paying the freight for them to be what they are. And then on top of all of that, they're bringing in all these small boat migrants who are becoming even bigger burdens on their already bloated and irredeemable welfare states, and requiring more and more subsidy from the American taxpayer all the while. This is totally unacceptable. And Rubio's speech was massively a rebuttal to all of that. Oh, I hate to admit it, I've got the clips that I want to look at are not in order. Damn. So in no particular order, I do have some clips that we want to look at. Here's little Marco walking up on the stage to begin with to a resounding applause. No, my apologies. That is the wrong clip. Here we go.
To European allies.
We do not want our allies to be weak, because that makes us weaker. For we in America.
He's 100% correct. One of the reasons America is weak and has to be concerned right now with the moves of Russia, and most especially China, is because our allies are weak. Right? We have no allies right now. We have no allies, not a single one, who offers a meaningful contribution. For example, let us assume for a moment, let's just imagine for a moment that China was in talks with Canada to onshore a great deal of Chinese commercial activity, which includes a robust Chinese contingent of military installation. I say let's assume that, but that's going on, right? That is happening currently, right? You'll hear critics of Trump's tariff policy talk about how it's so important to do good business with Canada because we get so much of our aluminum. They love to talk about the amount of aluminum that we get from Canada. Here's the funny thing about the aluminum we get from Canada. Canada doesn't produce any aluminum. Canada doesn't have any bauxite mines. Canada is importing all of the raw material from China and assembling the end product. Okay? We have bauxite mines. We have the raw material, the natural resources in the United States to produce all of the aluminum that we require in this country. And instead, for some psychotic reason, we're buying it from Canada, who, by the way, has just had major talks with China and are bringing a bunch of Chinese industry, and with it, Chinese government and Chinese military installations to Canada. One of the reasons the United States has never and has not feared being invaded by a foreign power is that there's an ocean between us and China. If suddenly China is right on our northern border, that becomes a different question altogether. Now, take what Rubio was just saying. If we have weak allies, that makes us weak. Well, ostensibly, Canada is one of those allies, and Canada has just given up the ghost to China in a huge way. Right? Now, imagine a future where China uses that strategic position to attempt to mount an invasion into the United States. Now, don't get me wrong. I don't actually expect that that's a real likelihood. Nor do I expect that China would have an easy run of it trying to come over, all of the various the lakes, the mountains. Believe it or not, the northern border of the United States is a difficult thing to cross, militarily speaking. To move armor over, it would almost all have to be done by flying over and dropping armor past the natural barriers on our northern border. But assume for a moment that China was so bold. And suddenly we find the United States active duty military deployed to secure our northern border against a foreign invader. And they've taken some steps to become a legitimate threat. And we find ourselves in need of help. What country on this planet can even offer useful assistance? Now, I've worked with some Kiwis and some Aussies and some Brits. I've worked with soldiers from all around the world in Afghanistan, and they're rock solid soldiers, right? Let me tell you something. They can do great work. Those individual soldiers, they can do great work when you put American equipment on them and take them out as one more body with an American contingent. But that's a substantial limitation. And if you need to know the real difference between an American soldier and a Canadian soldier, we don't drink while we're deployed in Afghanistan, ostensibly, because we're not allowed, it's a dry country. We're not allowed to have alcohol there, right? Canadians are provided 2 glasses of wine per day by their military. So are the French. The Aussies and the Kiwis get a beer every day, I think it is. But most everybody over there, except for the Americans, they get to have a drink. In fact, they get to have a drink or two almost every day. Americans, we're there to work. We're not there to fuck around. We're there to work. And I mean, don't get it twisted. I had a glass of scotch on my birthday while I was in Afghanistan, and our boys went and killed Osama bin Laden on my 30th birthday while I was actively deployed in Afghanistan. You best believe I came up with a glass of scotch and a Cuban cigar, and we roasted some meat over a pallet fire, and it was a good day. But day to day, you're dry because we came here to work, right? And that idea right there, we're here to work, that is a very American concept. That is not how the rest of the world thinks about their day-to-day.
Have no interest in being polite and orderly caretakers of the West's managed decline.
Not all Democrats.
There you go. We have no interest in being polite caretakers of the West's managed decline. And you'll see it cut to AOC there. We'll get back to AOC in a minute. That language right there, though, we have no interest in being the polite caretakers of America, of the West's managed decline. This is probably the strongest criticism that I'll offer to the speech there, is when he said managed decline, he was being a little generous. I think he was being a little polite and a little generous there. What we are seeing right now throughout Western civilization is not managed decline. What we are seeing is replacement in action. And not by happenstance, not by mistake, not incidentally. It's being done to you intentionally. Your cities, your schools, your churches are being deliberately degraded by the introduction of incompatible foreign agents. Right. And make no mistake, when I say agents, when people hear the word agent, they tend to think, like some kind of CIA, Mossad, Beijing, MI6. No. The word agent simply means one who acts on one's behalf. Okay? And people like Ilhan Omar have made it very clear. She has said it explicitly that she is there to represent the interests of Somalia. Excuse me, which is incorrect. The mere fact of her having said that should make her ineligible for office. If there's anything that disappoints me about Trump's second term, it's that we have not yet revoked her citizenship and deported her, because it's no longer a controversial conspiracy theory that she defrauded the U.S. government to immigrate and to achieve citizenship. It's painfully clear that she committed fraud, that she committed immigration fraud. And for that reason alone, she should not only be removed from office, but removed from this country and never allowed back. But the fact that while holding the office, she has stated in no uncertain terms that she is here to represent the interests of Somalia, where, oh, by the way, her constituents have stolen $9 billion. Hold on. There's more to that sentence. Per year for several years from you. So this the idea that it is merely a managed decline. The problem I have with that language is it suggests that we peaked, and now after having stricken that summit, we're starting to slope back down to the nadir because that is the natural course of things. That is incorrect, right? A managed decline would, that language suggests that the decline is inevitable, and that what is happening before your eyes is that we're doing our best to mitigate the damage of and fallout of that decline, and doing our best to kind of ride it down evenly so that the decline is not rapid, catastrophic, and explosive. Rather, it needs to be understood that we are not a country that is in a state of natural decline. We are a country that is being intentionally fed to hostile foreign invaders who seek to steal and consume your wealth and degrade your posterity and ravage your progeny. That is where we live. And it's beyond time that our politicians begin to acknowledge that fact. I think Rubio kind of started to touch on the more important, started to touch on the idea of that.
A new century of prosperity. And that once again, we want to do it together with you, our cherished allies and our oldest friends.
Now, that's a romantic and courteous supposition that Europe includes our oldest allies, or our strongest allies and oldest friends, but the fact is they don't. We're seeing some more conservative, stronger politicians begin to take office, or at least pursue high office in Europe. Excuse me. We're seeing some pushback in Europe. Forget the guy's name now. There's a Restore Britain party now that's led by this farmer who is, I like the guy. He's very unapologetically pro-Britain and get these nasty foreigners out of here. We have to reverse migration. We have to exfil all of this trash, clean it up, and get it out of here. They're moving in that direction, but it cannot be understated that everywhere that we have allies outside of the United States, you're looking at governments that have been overtaken. Rupert Lowe, thank you, Aaron Olson. Yeah, Rupert Lowe, he's fantastic. But everywhere you look, the British, the French, the Canadians, the Germans, everywhere you look, we could once have been great allies, but they've been infiltrated by communists, right? They've been so heavily infiltrated by communists that few of those countries will look different than Soviet Russia in the next 10 years unless they turn their ships around dramatically. And that's if, that is only if they are so fortunate as to weather the storm of unchecked migration. Right? It's actually much more likely that what they'll look like is Mogadishu, frankly. They are not doing well in Europe. So let's move on with the rest of this clip.
We want to do it together with you, with a Europe that is proud of its heritage and of its history, with a Europe that has...
Modern Europe is not proud of its heritage and its history, and it should be. It should be.
The spirit of creation and liberty that sent ships out into uncharted seas and birthed our civilization.
And found lesser civilizations who had not invented seafaring, or in many cases, the wheel.
With a Europe that has the means to defend itself and the will to survive.
Which is not modern Europe. Europe today does not have the means to defend itself or the will to survive. That is why they are being they're having their military security and national security subsidized by American patriots, American taxpayer dollars, and American military might. And it is also why they are being devoured by Pakistani rape gangs and human traffickers. Okay?
We should be proud of what we achieved together in the last century.
We should be, but we haven't achieved it together. America has carried the water for everybody, and they are grossly ungrateful parasites of our largesse.
But now we must confront and embrace the opportunities of a new one. Because yesterday is over. The future is inevitable. And our destiny together awaits. Thank you.
Our destiny together awaits. Well, it's waiting for something, and a lot of what it's waiting for is for these useless people to get off their asses and start doing the work that they were elected to do, that they're expected to do. I've got one more clip here, and I'm not sure which one this is, but here we go.
Mass migration was not, isn't some fringe concern of little consequence. It was and continues to be a crisis which is transforming and destabilizing societies all across the West.
That is correct. And I already touched on that this morning. Mass migration is not some little thing that's happening. Mass migration is, well, it's this simple. The global South was a cancer that has metastasized and erupted and is now seeking to infect the remaining healthy material on the host planet. It was, yeah. The global South, especially the Middle East and Africa, are there's no good there that's getting out into the rest of the world, right? Nothing. Any good that may be there is not what is going out and influencing the rest of the world. What is going out and influencing the rest of the world is welfare consumption, U.S. taxpayer capital being remitted back to prior host parasite countries, and the explosion of global slavery, sex slaves, child trafficking, and the like. And now Rubio has been pretty solid on a lot of these. I ain't gonna lie, I've had an absolute chuckle out of all the Rubio gets a new job memes that have been floating around. Hell, I could almost do a show just laughing at those with you guys. But his speech was very polite. It was very optimistic, but he did give that firm, hey, it's time to stop screwing around. He makes it clear that these partnerships do not equal permanent babysitting. Europe needs to secure its own borders, fund its defense, and start acting like grown-up sovereign nations. And he does call them out and say, hey, it's time for you guys to take take responsibility for your own national defense. We cannot merely continue to subsidize your nonsense. It's not an option. It's not that it's something we're just not interested in. It should be something that America is not interested in, but it is something we cannot afford. We cannot afford it. Right? And then I want to close on this. One of the things he talks about is the heritage. Is the heritage of America, and he mentions cowboys, right? He mentions that cowboys came from Spain, right? The vaqueros. And AOC clapped back with this.
Rubio's speech was a pure appeal to Western culture. My favorite part was when he said that American cowboys came from Spain.
I thought they came from Winnetou, but
I believe the Mexicans and descendants of African enslaved peoples would like to have a word on that.
Do you now? Is that what you believe? You absolute illiterate. Y'all, a lot of us grew up on Westerns. Remember the Westerns, the Indians riding over the hill on horseback? You know they didn't have horses, right? Until Western culture landed in the United States, the Indians were not horsemen. That is something they learned from white Western Europeans and Spaniards. Right? Forget that one for a moment. How about this? She says, well, I think the Mexicans might have something to say about that. Bitch, do you think that Mexicans existed before the Spanish conquistadors landed on them? There were no Mexicans in Mexico before Cortez. Right? This isn't complicated. Okay? Mexico didn't exist. There were no Mexicans because there was no Mexico. And more to the point, the people that are there that are Mexican today, ethnically speaking, are not the people that Cortez found when he arrived. They are the descendants of those people. They are the mestizos. They are la raza, right? They celebrate El Dia de la Raza, right? The birth of the Mexican people, because what you see in Mexico now are the result of the interbreeding between Spaniards and Aztecs and other native original indigenes. The original peoples that occupied Mexico are gone. They were bred completely away, right? And became what we now know as Mexicans. And you can look at a Spaniard, somebody, grown and raised in Spain, and somebody grown and raised in Mexico, and you look at the two of them next to each other, and you can say, okay, that one is from Spain, that one is from Mexico. I can see where maybe their trees collided, but they're not branching off the same trunk. Okay? And again, the Indians did not have horses. They did not have horseback riding. They didn't have the wheel or seafaring. These are technologies that these people did not have before they encountered Western civilization. Right? And then the whole thing about the black slaves, and she stumbles over herself she starts to say slave, and then she says descendants of enslaved people, or shut up, bitch. Slaves. Right? These are the people who want you to think that the term people of color and the term colored people are somehow have different meanings. Like, Jesus Christ, English is the only language you speak, you absolute muppet. But this, her criticism, oh, well, I think the Mexicans and the black slaves might have something to say about that. Okay, yes, there were black cowboys eventually. That eventually did happen. Do you know how many slave owners were involved in westward expansion? Almost none. Because Western expansion was largely accomplished by the offer that if you can claim a piece of land, it's yours, and people with few other prospects raced across the world to try and get to the other coast and grab themselves a piece of that American dream. Right? This wasn't plantation owners packing up their thousands of slaves because that wasn't a thing. And then walking across the country with all their slaves to grab. That's not how that worked. Aaron Olson points out the Cherokee took their slaves on the Trail of Tears. Yeah. 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 The first American slave owner was a black man who came and under a program where you were allowed to acquire, I think it was 625 acres. He brought a few dozen slaves because you were allowed to have an additional 500 acres per slave that you had. His name was I forget his name now. Anyway, That was the first American slave owner was a black man who brought a bunch of slaves so that he could claim several thousand acres of free land. But that aside, point being, black men, especially the so-called enslaved black men, as cowboys. Honey, let me clue you in on something. You are a person who believes that the slave owners were all these evil monsters who didn't think that black people were human and thought that they had very low intelligence and very low skill and very low general value. And your supposition is that with an entire year's worth of wages on an entire year's worth of revenue on the line to keep a herd of cattle while ranging it to graze, they would trust these black men in whom they had zero faith, according to your worldview that presupposes racism as a pure motivation. And it is your supposition that they were sending their slaves out to tend the cattle on unclaimed territory. You don't understand how racism works, do you? And that is one of the cruxes that we face today is the left doesn't understand what racism is. That's how they all turned out to be racist, I guess. So, all right, guys, that's about all I've got for you this morning. I'm going to go ahead and button this one up. Thanks for watching this morning. Appreciate you. We love you, and we will see you tomorrow. Oh man, I still have to do. I still owe like 3. What you call them? Raids for this month. So let me throw y'all one of those. I'm gonna go ahead and. Damn it. There's your raid. All right. You guys be safe out there. We love you.